coming back to the show for a wonderful conversation. I'm sure, as always, our good friend Tessa Lena. Tessa fights robots on the Substacks. How are you, my friend?
Hey, Steve, I'm good. And first off, the polite bit. I know that I haven't published our interview yet. And I have a pile of them, and people emailing me like, yo, like, had an interview like a month ago or whatever, 2 months ago. Where is it? And I'm like, I know. Sorry. So, so you were awesome. It's coming up very, very soon.
I
So,
had a lot of fun talking to you. I don't stress about that stuff. I really don't. I most of the stuff that I do is like we talked about this a
yeah,
little
yeah,
bit.
yeah.
The stuff that I do, even when I'm doing interviews on other shows, most of it's live. So once it's done, I usually just forget about it, and then sometimes a week or two later, I'll get tagged in something and be like, "Oh yeah, hey, this thing, go listen to it if you want to, or don't." So,
And the most important bit every time, the point of my attention is the comparative sizes of our heads. So I'm trying to balance here.
let me see what I can do, because there's cameras at a certain distance, portion of the desk, and I think we're good though. I think we're good.
No,
You
no,
just
like
have
I think I just did it. I just did it because every time I go back and it's like I have this giant head, like I'm a real alpha personality.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'll do my part in lean too. Maybe we can. If I encroach a little bit on the camera, maybe we
Yeah.
can almost match it.
Good to
How are
see
you
you, Steve.
doing?
I'm good. I mean, things are crazy, but that's nothing new. And I'm actually kind of peaceful, which which is happy. Like I'm on all that is happening. There comes a point when it's like, okay, so it's a journey. We talk about it all the time. So, and I have about two, at least, well, one, maybe two giant philosophical points that I think about that I want to bring up. But other than that, whatever you want to talk about.
Well, let's start with that then, because I've got silly stuff that I wanted to pull up. You know what? Maybe we should get the absurd out of the way first, perhaps.
You
The
can't get it out of the way. There's too much of it.
This is something that happened in good old Louisiana. Uh, there was apparently a city board meeting. What is it? Oh, House Education Committee devolved into chaos after members voted to make it illegal for schools to hide gender transitions from parents. And this is apparently a trans rights activist that hijacked the meeting. HB 81, which would prevent teachers from using a different name or pronoun for a student unless given written permission from parents, was voted out of the committee April 26 after hours of testimony from members of the LGBTQ community opposing the measure. The announcement came that the bill would move to the House floor for consideration. Screaming, grunting, and audible screeched fuck could be heard before the feed to the committee hearing cut out. Let's see. You take a look real quick.
As amended favorably to the House floor by a 7-5 vote. Is it? Appreciate your time, committee. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you. As amended favorably.
So there's that. Um, the committee heard other testimonies from individuals opposed to the measure, including one blue-faced drag queen self-styled as Big Gay Baby. And he is quoted on the record in the committee meeting as saying, "I'm a big gay baby." He says, "I believe we're all here for the same reason, uh, which is to make schools a safe space for students and faculty to thrive." Big Gay Baby, also known as Maxwell, continued by urging the committee to vote no on HB 466 measure for the wounded child that still feels closeted inside me. Um, that could also perhaps be an unhappy meal? Do they make those? This is wild, Tessa.
I think, well, I'm inclined toward philosophy, and it is almost like, and I'm going to swear because you didn't, because I know I can. It is like a logical continuation in the shape of a clusterfuck or another clusterfuck that was the opposite of that. And that is also a part of the bigger philosophical point that I wanted to talk about. But see, so I mean, like, and I've been thinking about this specific topic in the context of like transgender, this and that and the other, right? So we have right now, as far as camps, we have one camp that is this, that is crazy in this sense that, you know, people who say her penis and all those things, right? Insane. On the other hand, we have a camp that is also extreme, that just says like transgender people do not exist. They are all like crazy sick fucks, and they all, well, I mean, like just in denial of the fact that nature is complex, right? And the craziness of today is a weaponized version of the craziness of the past. So without the craziness of the past, the craziness of today would not be possible. But because people like to practice tribal thinking, it's like I had this on my blog when, I mean, I posted something, I don't remember what, and then somebody in comments responded something along the lines of like trans crazy, and then I expressed my sincere opinion. I said that I think that people with unusual or like non-standard in terms of majority combinations of male and female energy do exist. And in cultures that preceded our establishment, religious cultures, they were revered as healers and considered bearers, like very special gifts. And I'm subscribed to that. At the same time, what's happening right now socially with all the craziness in her penis and what you just showed, it's not really related to the genuine people with very special gifts. It's a political thing, and it's a crazy thing, and it's weaponized to the nth degree, and it's not good. But then the person got like kind of not really mad. I don't really get much of that, luckily, but kind of like, oh, he was expecting me to just repeat conservative talking points, like, oh, trans people are like insane. And I did not, because, and I will not, because I don't think that. And here we are. And the tragedy and the mystery, and at the same time the beauty of our current situation, is that I don't think it's possible to solve one without solving the other. And like, hello to the multi-thousand-year-old clusterfuck. And it's like, if something is unbalanced at the core of it, at the root of it, then crazy things are going to pop up in different shapes and in different flavors. And people are going to, if we don't really think about the root of it, people are going to complain about each expression separately, as if it's its own thing. And we're going to keep walking in circles. And so this camp is going to win temporarily, then that camp is going to win temporarily. Like in the past, like if somebody genuinely, and by the way, I want to make a distinction. What they're doing to kids is atrocious. Like that's obvious, and adults can do whatever they want. Messing with kids is just, I mean, it is child abuse, because, like, for example, when I was a kid, like, obviously I'm female, right? So when I was a kid, I would tell anybody who would listen that I wanted to be a boy. Why? I was just getting along with boys, and I liked boy toys, and I played with trucks. It wasn't a sexual thought on my mind. It was just something, I liked that vibe. I like, the girls didn't like me. I liked them. They didn't like me. So I was hanging out with boys, playing with trucks and soldiers and like all those things, right? And shooting like arrows from the, whatever you call it, the bow, right? And so, and I would tell anybody, I mean, like, it's not like I was talking about it all the time, but occasionally I would say something like, oh, I wish I were a boy. Like, you know, like I want to be a boy. So, and it's not like I consciously was thinking about like, you know, changing my body. Of course not. But I had this thought, right? So, I mean, like, I like the whole presence of like being a boy. And I grew up, and like it works quite nicely in me, like all the energies. And, you know, like I'm not a meat person necessarily, in the sense that I feel I'm a relatively strong person, I think. So like it's all beautiful. I figured it out. And I enjoy being female very much. I would not want to be a man. I'm sorry to say that. I would not want to be one because I really like being myself. Which is not to say like being a man, I'm sure for a man is beautiful too. But if that happened in today's environment, like I'm scared to think what would have happened. And because of the peer pressure and what kids, obviously the kids, kids like to live in fantasy. That's a normal process of development, right? So somebody wants to be maybe like a bear today, like a butterfly tomorrow, like a princess. And like that's normal, right? And
For like a year and a half, my now 17-year-old would have sworn up and down to you that he was Bumblebee from the Transformers. Like, and he had a costume that he'd get home from school, he'd throw it like disintegrated, man. It was his jam for a little bit. We didn't go have a bunch of metal shoved into him, and he doesn't like fold into a Camaro. So, I feel
exactly. And and granted, some kids are born with a non-typical, like non-majority combination of male and female energy. It's been known for thousands of years, and it's been known and considered in cultures pre-establishment, like pre-establishment world religions. It was considered like, like there's many things in life. Some things are majority type, some things are not majority type. And there's a special application for everything. Like, like in our bodies, we have different cells. Maybe they're more of some than in others. And it's normal. Meaning that there's a special application spiritually for the community. And the idea was that people who come with those special combinations, and maybe they're different between each other even, and different cultures have different like classifications of those things, depending on their culture. But it's like people have the special ability to perceive the male perspective and the female perspective at the same time, which is rare. And maybe we don't need a whole lot of people with that, but having some people with that is amazing when, there's a problem that needs to be solved or a conflict or whatnot. Like, I have no idea. Like, men are mysterious to me. Like, I secretly think that women are much smarter, but not so secretly because I just said it. But, but then, but I'm saying it lovingly. There's good and bad. And I would definitely want to have a man around if I'm in a physical fight. Well, I wouldn't really do a physical fight. I have no idea how, right? So it's like there are things that people are good at individually, and individuals are different. Some people are like, some women are more like, they have more male in them, some not. And then like same with men. And it's like, welcome to Earth. We're all different. So there was no need to make a big oppressive deal out of it before. And a side theory is that I think that any people with spiritual gifts were probably endangering the system, like the establishment of the time. So they came up with a lot of nonsense and a lot of bullshit. And that's actually part of the bigger philosophical talk I wanted to bring up too, to curb them or to get rid of them so that they have no competition. They can dominate and oppress everybody under the pretext of many, many lies. So that's also a part of it. But coming back to today, like it came out a completely different conversation, right? We started with this craziness and now we're talking history. But we can't really resolve this insanity without saying, wait a second. And I'm not talking about like intellectual guilt or whatnot, none of that nonsense, none of the social justice nonsense. I'm just saying like deeply from the heart, it's like we've been all lied to. And those bad guys on top, they're messing with all of us. And I'm sure there's this trend to weaponize trans in the gender sense of it for transhumanism and for profits, for all those like plastic surgeries and gender reassignment. And that's a travesty, and that's an insult to humanity, and that's an abuse. At the same time, there is a trend to weaponize like anti-trans, where if you say what I just said, like, trans people, genuine trans people are fine. And they probably wouldn't want to be like me or like you. They would want to be nothing but themselves if the society on purpose was not messing with them. So it's like you have to be either this extreme camp or that extreme camp. And that's what the alphabets want. I do not stand with the alphabets. I stand with people. And it's a mess. And I don't think we can get through by strictly yelling. And I applaud, of course, I applaud any effort to protect the kids. I mean, like, that's a given. That's my position. I think that kids should be allowed to be kids, and putting guilt in them, and for like even putting the notion of inadequacy in the head of a kid because like they are in a wrong body. Nobody is in a wrong body per se, just existentially. And like, it's great we have all those surgeries right now, like adults can do whatever they want, none of my business. Like, it's their life, and I love them and I respect them. What I mean, I have no idea who they are, what their purpose is, none of my business. As I mean, like, that's that. But kids should not be made inadequate because their body is, I mean, they can figure it out when they grow up. But yeah.
Well, yeah. If your brain's not fully developed, you shouldn't be making decisions that are involve irreversible surgery. You just shouldn't. You shouldn't. I've encouraged my kids that like, I understand that you live in California, you're going to be offered weed, you're going to be offered a lot of other drugs at a young age, most likely just because of where you go to freaking school. I get that. I get that. Here's what I would like for you to do. I would like for you to wait until your brain's fully developed, or get as close to that as possible before you start putting things into your body that are going to alter your brain chemistry and alter the way that you perceive it, all that kind of stuff. If you could try to wait for that, write it out a little bit, I would really appreciate it. That's and um you know it's definitely working out for my 17-year-old, in terms of he just doesn't he's not into it. But when it comes to irreversible, completely paradigm altering decisions, it it seems like the push to have those made younger and younger and younger and younger. And then you're right, the counter to that, where you've got to be so anti that the only thing that you're doing is guaranteeing a rebellious response to it. You've got to be able to have a little bit more, I don't know, nuanced approach to it. And you've got to be able to say, okay, well, why do you think you're like, what's in your environment that's showing you that this is what you need to be, because let's show you a couple of other environments. And there's been a number of people who have at least anecdotal stories about their 10 to 13, 14-year-old comes home saying that they're non-binary, or they're trans, or they're this, or they're that, and mom or dad puts them in the garden for a couple of weeks, and they're just not anymore. They're not. They're just kids again. They're reconnected, completely reconnected with nature, had zero exposure to social media, zero exposure to the complete oversaturation of what I consider to be a cultural psychological operation.
It is a psychological operation, and it's I mean, what they're doing, it seems pretty obvious because, well, hello, transhumanism. I'm pretty convinced that even the negative connotation with the word transphobic, it has nothing to do, well, obviously, with anybody on top caring about any genuine transgender people. It has to do with the fact that the word is being primed for, like, if somebody says, whatever, 5 years from now, like, I don't think that AI is human, they're going to be told, oh man, you're transphobic. I mean, like, that's really the reason. It has nothing to do with people. It's just that they know that in order to set up a cultural shift, they have to start working at it, for some time. And it takes a generation at least to like reshape the common perception, and sometimes longer, but at least a generation. So now that the word transphobic is a really bad word, and it's a word that gets people fired from their job, and then people look funny at them in certain environments, and so it's not a good word to be called, right? And then if that is seamlessly shifted towards loving AI or thinking, oh, how can you say AI is not human? Don't you think it has feelings? You're so transphobic. That is where it's going. I'm convinced. I could be wrong, but I think I'm right. So nothing to do with people. And the only way to deal with the really psychological operation that you mentioned, which I think is correct, is to tap into our love. And it sounds like here we go again with like Tessa and her lofty like words, but I think it really is the only way, because you cannot convince anybody by yelling. It's impossible. What we're having today with all the craziness is exactly the result of, again, what was happening for thousands of years. It's coming out, it's like a pimple that is coming out of a body that has like multiple diseases. It's not a thing in itself, it's a consequence. But of course, people who were doing psychological operations back then, and then the people who are doing psychological operations now, and they've changed their style, and they change their style all the time, and they change their talking points, and they change their demographic. But underneath, it's the same crap. And without realizing that those people are victims too. And I'm not talking about like genuine transgender people. There are plenty of transgender people who are just minding their business. Like they don't want to be like a straight man or a straight woman. They want to be themselves, and God bless them. And I don't see how, like, if somebody told me that in order to be genuine, I have to be you or my next door neighbor, and I would be then tormented with the thought that, oh, unless everybody calls me Steve, and or what I mean, like, that's insane, and that's a recipe for like perpetual misery. And only a person with zero love, with only like bad intentions, can prime millions or thousands of people into thinking that in order to feel good about themselves, in order to feel happy, they need the world to call them whatever different pronoun or what. I mean, like, that's abuse against the very people who sometimes internalize it. And on the side of anybody who wants to fix it, I think that like transcending the own feeling of hurt and like abuse and like how it's crazy and oh my God, they're stealing our culture and our society. Yes, they are. Yes, it's true. But you can't stay in this feeling of hurt anyway, not because it's not justified. It may be very well justified. However, staying in it, it's not going to get us anywhere. And that's a very practical. So my stance for love and strength and being kind is not a stance for just being a doormat. Not at all. It's the opposite of that. It's a stance of being bigger than all the abuse 100 and seeing that the same entities in broader terms, they abuse our camp, they abuse their camp, they abuse every camp. And standing up to abuse altogether is the only way to go. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Well, let's kind of go back through it a little bit, because you were talking about at one point the different sort of flavors of crazy pops that people are handed out, and they're all made with the same basic ingredients, and nobody wants to see what the root of the problem is, because all too often the answers to resolving it are overly simplistic. Lots more love, lots more personal responsibility, acceptance that in order for things to change outwardly, they've got to change dramatically inwardly, the things like that. And so there's this, I I don't know, I constant, both because of external pressure and internal fear and laziness, all of the other things that come with it, the struggle that a lot of people have in order to recognize what the root of any problem is. So I think I mean, it is definitely one of the reasons why Slow News Day and here there's so much focus on like nobody's coming to save you. You need to be your own hero. You really need to be
Exactly.
your own. And but that implies a lot of work that a lot of people are unwilling to commit to. Um, and, and that's the rub. There's this status quo with all these nice little traps and nice little tricks to keep people from ever really doing introspection, from ever really finding the root issue. You're the root cause of a problem. And yeah, it's, so recognizing that and then jumping into it is critical.
And I think I agree with you. And I think a part of it is humility and patience. And again, those words can mean many things, just like the word love. And I want to come back to love for a second. It again, it does not mean let others abuse you. That is not love, because self-love is also love. And it's critical to feel so good about yourself. And I mean good existentially, as in, even if there are times when it feels like nobody else respects you for who you are, which I'm sure everybody goes through that, and sometimes even for a prolonged period of times, because our society is fucked up. And oftentimes, the parents don't quite understand because they were also like taught incorrectly, and it goes for generations. So we're in this situation that is actually very confusing. That is true. There's no respect for the soul at all in society. And so it's easy and natural to acknowledge the fact that, like, okay, so maybe not too many people and sometimes nobody at all respects my soul for what it is. And that is very sad, and that feels like shit. However, I think the point of that exercise or that experience existentially is to figure out how to give it to yourself. And then from there, it's like a chemical reaction, and not in terms of, like, again, stupid, just like formal scholastic thing. And maybe at times it does help to tell you, I love and accept myself. I love, and I mean, like, that's like that maybe sounds stupid, but sometimes it's work, like sometimes it's good. But it's not really the essence of it. The essence of it, once you actually feel that yes, you're here for a reason. Yes, you came here because there's a job to do, and it's a respectable job, and it's an important job. And it doesn't matter what whoever says about it. If you feel on the inside that that's your job, that's your job. And it has existential weight. It has, like, you play into this huge puzzle that you maybe don't understand, but there's, like, the puzzle consists of many parts, right? And tiny little parts maybe. And without each tiny little part, it's not quite the puzzle that it's supposed to be, right? So you are important. And that is not like lofty talk, that is not like stupid talk. This is factual reality. You're important, and each of us is. And that is self-love, the real kind. And from there, it is much easier to deal with the bullying and all the abuse, and to deal with it, again, not in terms of just letting people walk over you, not at all, but kind of just being, again, it sounds very Confucian, and I am not intending to sound Confucian, but it's almost like the way of, like, being calm, like calm even if it's a battle, but being a calm warrior. It's like you evaluate what to do, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, what's productive, what's not productive, and you don't do it from anger or from hurt. And you have the times to process your anger and hurt, to think about it. And if, like, arts are beautiful for that, because you just write it out or like sing it out, and like fuck 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 fuck, it's like it's shit, it's horrible. But then you go back to calm, and you like, okay, so what now? How do I deal with it? How did I deal with it in a productive manner? And that, I don't think that human beings really have much else. And then of course there's prayer, there's like very spiritual things that one can do, and that's a part of that. But there's nothing like, there's no secret formula, like easy 1 2 3 way, and then here we go, you didn't have self-love, and now you do. It doesn't work this way, it's impossible. So you have to go through the hurdles and bang your head on the wall and cry and scream and complain, and then eventually, after you complain enough, it's like, okay, complaining doesn't help, so maybe I should do something else. At least that, that has been my experience. And then from there, you're like, okay, I'm a part of this society. I'm here now today in this clusterfuck. What can I do to make it better? And then again, it doesn't mean that glamour shows up that second. It means that from that point on, you're a conscious worker for the good, and that's the rest of your life. Welcome to Earth.
Right. Well, and it's I don't know, I guess maybe we talked about this, but like the permission to let yourself fuck up and the permission to let yourself, lose any sort of long-standing conviction about how you viewed the world. Because almost everybody was presented with a picture of the world that is vastly different than the one that we were born into. You know what I mean? There's and depending on how much propaganda you were subjected to and what flavor it was, unlearning whatever kind of nonsense you were fed at whatever state indoctrination center of a school you went to, unlearning that is a process in and of itself. And there's all kinds of mental and physical and spiritual investments that people make in these things along the way that make it even harder to decouple from. And there's I don't know, it's wild when you're sincerely trying to gain a more complete picture of how the world works and how you work in it, how we all work together, and what the best pathways forward is, humanity could be, as opposed to what we're currently experiencing. And I want to make it very clear that I'm saying could be as opposed to should be, because I'm not trying to tell anyone what to do or how to do it. I have ideas about how we could get to the next step of being able to make our own decisions. You know what I mean? I think that there are things that we could do immediately that would help us gain a lot more liberty, a lot more freedom. Um, but I mean, after that,
yeah.
I don't want anybody telling me what to do or how to live. I'm definitely not telling anybody else what to do or how to live, in that you're not actively harming somebody else. Outside of that, we're pretty good.
No, I agree. And it's interesting that, so if we look at what kind of forces we deal with, when we are, since we're a child and all our lives. So on the one hand, there's like us, right? So the me, the perception of a me, right? And then there's obviously there's love and all the good things, and people who have a clue. Not a lot of that, but it exists. And but then there's a lot of confusion. But then there's also forces who deliberately try to like make things shitty, like whether it's the alphabets or whatever, the representatives of the domination system. And I love that. I use that phrase every time I think we talk by my friend Stephen Newcomb, because I think it's a beautiful term, domination system. And there's an upgrade to this term, actually. I was talking to Steve recently, and we were talking about one of the, the whole COVID nonsense things. And I said, you should call it domination scam. And we laughed, because I think this is what it is. That is essentially what it is. It's a very, very old scam. And we're living in this very, very old scam. And I'm building the segue to the big topic that I want to talk about. But coming back, so it's tricky to navigate, especially I think if you're a kid. We usually figure it out with life experience and with years. And if we're lucky, there are people who help us along the way in a loving way. But going back to camps and anger and anger being perceived as the only way to protect our soul, essentially, because that's what anger is. I mean, like, anger serves that. It can be weaponized, and it is, like, there's no tomorrow. But fundamentally, the essence of anger is that you refuse to be a victim, kind of like you yell and scream because you say, like, I'm not going to cry, right? Like that kind of thing. And it's a valid emotion. It's an emotion that can be taken from healing to dangerous very quickly, and that's just how it is, which is why it's important to be aware. Like, and I think it's like we all have anger, but dealing with it more in private or through art is just more productive. Not in terms of good or bad or moral or immoral. It's like a wildfire. Like, it can become very dangerous very quickly if not contained, if not handled like consciously, right? So, but so then if that's overcome, so and I'm not making it up. I feel loving towards the people who do like awful things, and even like in the vaccine mandate camp and all those things. I don't like what they do. I have no respect for what they do. I've been on the receiving end of that abuse too, but I don't feel I do not have anger for them. And it's not because like I'm so like lofty or I'm like so smart, but I mean I just don't, because I guess I've gone through so much crap of different kinds of different flavors that I kind of like I worked it out, and that helps me actually be more productive. And again, in the institutional religious context, I mean those things are often presented in the moralistic, like this is virtuous, this is not virtuous, this is good, this is, but it's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about productive. I'm talking about useful. It just so happens that what's useful to the world is also useful to me, and what's useful to me is also useful to the world in this case. So, and this is how the world is designed. I think when we genuinely do things that are useful for us and that feel good and happy, that just feel satisfying, like something inside us knows that this is the right thing to do. It's also good for the world, and the design of that is beyond human, like beyond human perception and capability. Like, I have no idea how it works, but it works this way. So I don't know where I'm going with that, so I'll shut up. I'll let you talk.
Well, okay, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. And um in terms of I don't know, how do I want to put it? You always give us so much to think about, Tessa. You do. You do. It's fun. No, I love it. All right. Let's say um well, okay. Now, I guess here's where I'm at with it, especially in terms of not it's not caring about, but not actively seeking like violent retribution on behalf of a nebulous and collective we. I Chances are, if this afternoon, when we get done talking, we go back online, let's say hypothetically Anthony Fauci has been arrested for crimes against humanity. Okay,
Happen.
let's hypothetically let's say that happens. Now, am I ever going to be asked my opinion as to what his outcome is going to be? Probably. I'll probably ask my opinion on that. But will I ever be in the room for the decision? Certainly not. It is what would happen to Anthony Fauci were he to be arrested for crimes against humanity in the next 17 minutes or so. If that were to happen, do I have the power to affect the outcome of that decision in a meaningful way? Likely not. So is my energy better pushed towards doing what I can to take a couple of more steps to ensure that me, my family, my friends, my loved ones are as prepared as could be for whatever. You probably is advocating for that person's head to be put on a spike and mounted on the city gate, or not going to affect the outcome. I don't know. I really don't. Um, but I do think that as far as productivity is concerned, it's way better suited, pointed away from vengeance.
I think so. And I want to connect, I want to finally get to the big topic that I wanted to talk about to begin with. So that's history. And that's, again, that's what I call the mother of all psyops, right? I mean, like the term that I'm kind of proud of that I came up with. And it also is that domination scam in a way, right? So let's say for millions of years, humankind existed, and people actually had a very decent idea from, if we go and like study that and study some of those cultures, people had a very decent idea about how the world worked, both on the physical level and on the spiritual level. Very, very good idea. And different cultures had their pieces of the puzzle in terms of, like people, we all have special talents and special preferences and special loves. So, but foundationally, like the basics of how the world operates and where we come from and where we go and how to live the life in order to be harmonious, which doesn't mean that everybody was doing that, but the knowledge part, it was very, very good from if you look into that, if you like study that. But then when people have a good idea and it comes with choice, right? Well, everything comes with choice. So that kind of knowledge can be used for good and can be used for bad. And human beings are human beings. Some were using it for good, and I think the majority were using it for good. Some were using it for bad, just like it always is with people. And then I think that some of the people who were using it for bad, they are the ones who founded institutional religions. And the depth and the genuine 5D chess character of the world we live in that sense is astounding. And before I go back to describing that notion, I want to stress that we, the people of today, a lot of time has passed since then. A lot of time has passed since that scam, or multiple scams, or like a layer of scams. So we have adopted the words we were given and put them back into the light, many of us. Because when people pray, I mean, God is not stupid, and we talked about it before. So I think God is very capable of figuring out what's in the person's heart and whether the person says Jesus or John Smith or what. I mean, like if the person, like it's the feeling, I mean, like the feeling exists, it's real. And God is capable, I believe, that's my opinion. All I'm saying is my opinion. I'm not telling anybody what to believe or what to do or what to say, what to feel. That is my opinion. We've taken back, a lot of the people in today's institutional religions have taken back the whatever lies they were given and they put them back into the good because we have it, like we're born with this light. And people use the words that maybe they were given for not so good reason, but they use them in the purity of their heart. And then it's something for the light and it's something for the good. But that speaks to the beauty of human spirit and the beauty of the creator and the beauty of the universe and the potential for love. It does not speak to the truthfulness of the people who founded a scam with not so good intentions. And I think that eventually, sooner or later, we'll come to a place knowledge-wise where people collectively, and it can be in thousands of years from now, I don't know, when people collectively like, oh, holy crap, this is what happened. So the people whose words we kept repeating were actually the bad ones, and the people who they slandered as like suspicious pagans, this and that. That drives me crazy. When people I love and respect, all of a sudden they go on a rant about the darkness of paganism, and I'm like, have you? I mean, that is the foundational. That is the mother of all psyops. Anyway, so
Yeah.
it's completely upside down. And when you look at it, and again, obviously, among the pagans, there were people who were doing good and people who were doing bad, just like today. They're human beings. We're human beings. They're our ancestors. They're our family. So, like, say, they're good Christians and bad Christians. They're good pagans and they're bad pagans. And but the foundational lie that we were told to be afraid of nature, to be afraid of our powers, to be afraid of our connection to nature, that I'm convinced, and again, that is my opinion, was made up by people with not so good intentions at all, so that they have no competition, and so that the knowledge that could actually kick them out of power pretty quickly, that it would be not respected or laughed at or disappeared and all those things. I mean, that's just politics. It has nothing to do with spiritual. That's politics. And so we are dealing with that. So getting frustrated about a COVID lie or a trans lie is understandable, but I think it needs to be viewed in the context that we're in this much bigger lie. So, like, if we invest into being frustrated over a lie, then we're going to be frustrated for a long time, and that's just miserable existence. So it makes sense to again place yourself in the world as you feel in each moment, and do the work that your heart tells you is the right thing to do, and try to be truthful as it works for you in the moment. But I'm not subscribed to the idea that you constantly have to say everything you think at all times, like just because it's true, because it's like it doesn't work. It's a nice sentiment, but it doesn't work, because people are going to believe whatever they believe until it's time for them to personally, from the inside, accept whatever else. And that's just how it is. And demanding that the world changes its nature, I think, is moot. It's just not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you have to, if there's it's so trite, but if there's again, if there's external change that you want to see in your immediate surroundings in the world at large, then you have to be some level of healed or healing within yourself. And you've got to be committed to continuing to like build yourself up. And it's not like in a selfish way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
yeah.
just you can't provide good help when you're broken. I know this from physical injury. Do you know what I mean? I know it from growing up and playing soccer and hockey and shit like that. Like you play hurt, but you don't play your best when you're hurt.
Well, I
The
mean,
same.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's it's healthy and it's helpful for both happiness and also productive practical accomplishment, including in defeating the Great Reset, which I consider one of my biggest goals. And defeating the Great Reset, well, I mean, like, that's a slogan. I don't know if we are going to defeat the entire beast that drove it for has been driving it for thousands of years. So if we can defeat this particular like version and return the world a little bit to maybe a little saner, that's going to be a big accomplishment. Whether it's going to happen, time will tell. But I work towards that, because it's insulting what they're doing, and it's just undignifying and crazy and destructive. But at the same time, I do not flatter myself thinking they understand exactly the trajectory. And you know how sometimes in life, you prefer this over that, but then the things like things work otherwise, and then 10-20 years later you look back and like, holy fuck, that made sense. I mean, that actually helped me a lot and that was much better. Like uh, uh, uh that's going to please me what I'm about to say. But I mean, like, I had a particular ex guy, right? And I was so heartbroken when like he cheated and all. I mean, I was so devastated. I mean, I trusted him so much as like my best friend, all that. And I was just so heartbroken. And now I look back and I laugh and I thank him. And that's not like a like girly magazine, like beating myself on the chest. I mean, like that's how I genuinely feel. And I just remember that like horrible, tragic, like very, very sad state that I was in like for a long time over that. And now it's like, oh my God, I'm so grateful he fucked off. And I'm saying it almost lovingly, but like it's like like that actually was a big favor to me. At the time I didn't think that. And I think history wise it's kind of similar but much more dramatically with like a lot more like horrible things collectively. But in the end I think we learn collectively just like we learn individually. So it would be nice if we became wise collectively or state wise in a well, I'm not going to use sustainable because it's a horrible word nowadays, but in a easy to maintain manner collectively. But maybe then we wouldn't know what we would do otherwise, because knowledge obtained through fucking up usually is much steadier than knowledge obtained from just like never fucking up and just believing in theory. So, and I'm turning your show into this new age, I don't know, Mary Williamson.
Okay, so let's get out our favorite crystals and talk about the last time we had a really good cry. Yeah.
Oh, like, and that's actually really funny. That was a very long time ago, and I laugh about it. But I did go through a phase at some point when I went to all those like business seminars and comment to that. I grew up with total disdain for anything self-help because in the Soviet culture, it's like what? Like therapy, self-help, that's what stupid Americans do. Because I mean, like we here, like get a friend, like talk to a friend, get tough, like deal with it. That was how I grew up. And then in America, like eventually somebody tempted me, like, oh, you should check this out and this and that. And I went through a phase for a few months when I was like traveling and going to all those seminars and all that. And the funniest thing is when the several gurus, quote unquote, at the same lunch table, and the desperation is palpable and the frustration because they all have the need to preach, and they all have the need to preach. So they try to preach at each other, and it doesn't really work because nobody wants to listen. Everybody wants to preach. It's the funniest thing ever. So that's very amusing.
The closest I've really got to that is having a whole bunch of comedians sitting at the same table where everybody's trying to one up the other person. and so you're listening just enough to where you can, jump in and club somebody over the head. Man, gosh.
Oh,
I had a
do
couple.
you want to talk about something like information, like serious thing? Do you want to?
Oh, sure.
So I was just writing another article about Alzheimer's disease, and it is very interesting because we talked about it before. Last year, they came up with this news that everything that they thought about it for the past 20 years was based on a fraudulent paper, like fraud. Like the conclusion at the time was that it's just blatant fraud. Like image was forged, and then billions of dollars of funding research and drug development and useless things. Later, oops, so it looked like it was fraud, which, by the way, did not prevent the FDA to May last year, fast track or declare for the fast track development of a vaccine against Alzheimer's based on that concept that is now probably fraud. It's in the works. Hello. But in the meanwhile, there's this whole new thing where they're saying maybe it's actually infectious. And before I go here, I want to make 2.5 disclaimers. So one disclaimer, figuring out the nature of how something works is very different from whether we should be afraid. And I want to make it very, very clear. Because as we know, in the mainstream, as soon as something is declared infectious, then we should be hiding under the bed and getting a million vaccines. And that's the only reason they tell us. And Point number 2 is that it's not a debate about germ versus terrain. I think both germ and terrain exist, and I insist that I think that, and I'm entitled to thinking that. And it even has nothing to do with viruses, because there's bacteria and parasites and fungi and all those things. And I don't want to get into that this very second. But
I'm not evangelical about it.
oh, good. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I was joking. I mean, I can get into that publicly, but it's like, it's not the point. The point is, I think that energy travels from one person to another, and it can be a bacteria, it can be fungi, and viruses may exist or not exist, but the principle of like energy can travel from one person to another and then have different effects depending on the terrain. I think that's biology and world and life. But anyway, it's not even about that. So they came up with this, and they're blaming different pathogens. So there was a guy who announced in 2018, early 2018, he had a foundation. He announced a challenge, $1 million challenge, to find like one pathogen. And he was convinced from what it looks like that there was one pathogen responsible for that. And I don't know what happened to the guy, because Norin, I think was his last name. So his website is no longer up. Like that, like his online presence disappeared. So I know that this challenge lasted for 3 years, and it was announced that nobody won the $1 million. They were like $2,100 distributed between several participants who showed like this pathogen or that pathogen or that pathogen. There were a couple of bacteria, there was toxoplasma, and a couple of what they called viruses, whatever. They said it. I'm just saying what they said, right? And so there were those like things that happened. They identified several. But what's happening right now in the mainstream undercurrent, so it's still under the radar. They are talking more and more and more about the infectious origin of dementia. And personally, I believe there's some truth to that, because I did a bunch of research into toxoplasma, and I think that is actually something that we need to think about as opposed to COVID, but without fear. But what I'm concerned about is that right now it's under the radar, and there's talk about like vaccines against infectious AD, and maybe they're saying influenza. Actually, like flu vaccine reduces the risk of AD. That's what they're saying, Alzheimer's. And I probably mispronounce it because I'm not American. I always mispronounce this word. But so my concern is that they are prepping the countermeasure. And when they're ready with the countermeasure, they're going to say, oh, we made this big new discovery. It turned out what we believed in before was incorrect, which is probably accurate. But now we know, and now you have to get vaccinated so that you don't become a burden on your loved ones and be a responsible citizen, or don't become a burden on the state. And given that for many, many reasons, the levels of dementia in older people and even in younger people nowadays, why? Nobody knows. The doctors are puzzled. Anyway, it's going up, right? And it's really going up. And so I'm bringing it up because I want people, especially actual doctors with a good conscience, to look into that as much as they can, so that when the narrative changes, that we actually have an idea how it actually works. Because if it is infectious, for example, if toxoplasma, which is a parasite and prevalent, very, very prevalent in population, like high percentages in the West. So, and I wrote about it, and I recommend, I'll tweet it. I recommend everybody reads that research, because what they teach doctors in medical school and what the scientists are saying nowadays are two very different stories. So, but if it is infectious to some degree, it's good to know, but without fear and without having to be injected with nonsense, right? So I'm just bringing it up so that people think about it and that we're prepared. If a year or 2 or 3 from now, they say, oh, everybody has to get vaccinated against AD so that, you get your UBI and blah, blah, blah. So we're
It
ready.
turns out that the spike proteins that we put in the mRNA gene therapy way back in 2021, well, it turns out that some of those I'm just saying hypothetically, turns
Right.
out some of those collect around the brain. They're doing something that's contributing to Alzheimer's, dementia, this, that, or that. So just take this to counteract that. And then we've got a couple other products that we're going to have you take to counteract the adverse events that you experience from your AD medication. But don't worry, we've got you covered just as long as you're a perpetual customer that never once considers their gut biome, that never once considers the kind of food they're putting into their body, that never once considers the air or the water or any of that thing. Just listen to us. We got you. The science is settled. This is safe and effective. Go back to sleep.
Well, exactly. And because the genuine health of people is in decline, as we see, as we know, for multiple reasons, and not just the thing, but also, like, as we know, they're spraying crap from the skies and there's environmental toxicity and EMFs and all that. None of that helps. So, like, my personal view on that is that it's actually important to think those things through and figure out the actual battlefield and the actual, like, how things work as much as possible, and then deal with that. And so when the narrative change comes, it's better to be prepared realistically as opposed to just saying, oh, it's bullshit because it can be. So maybe there's some truth to that, but maybe they're using it for like crap. So yeah.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I don't know, there's some of that that involves really getting down into explaining how there's a counter narrative to every narrative. It's like we were talking about earlier with the extreme presentation of what they want people to think that the trans community in general represents. And then on the opposite side of that, you've got people that are like, well, not only do you not exist, but let's exterminate every one of you just to make sure. And then we had just a couple of weeks ago, Sarah Higdon, who's a transgender libertarian activist, was on here going, no, I suffer from a mental illness. Gender dysphoria is a mental illness. That's what I have. This is how I dealt with it. This is what I'm doing but I'm living with a mental illness. And that was their position. I don't know, because I'm just me, and I'm clearly unstable in a handful of ways my own right, so I'm not trying to be out here super judgy, but I do agree that, like, there's a huge gap in what people want to react to and what the legitimate problem is, and the scope of the legitimate problem in terms of the psyop of dismissing and quite literally demonizing paganism, which is just a
Right.
broadband term. Pagan,
Which is like rural folk, like it's just like
country people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so have you ever read, I want to say it's Jitterbug Perfume by Tom Robbins?
No.
Okay. Tom Robbins is a fiction writer that has a bunch of stuff, kind of hippy dippy or whatever. But there's a scene in Jitterbug Perfume where Jesus bumps into Pan in the forest. There's a little conversation about, like, oh, well, I'm here to make sure that, like, these people don't go back to your nature, I'm the future, this sort of thing. And Jesus was representing, like, institutionalized dogmatic religion. Pan, of course, representing whatever, nature and all of that kind of stuff. So it's the concept essentially being what you were talking about. There was institutionalized religion swooped in, replaced what was a at the soul and genetic level, a recognition of our relationship, fundamental balance that needs to exist in nature with I have ethereal solutions for all of your problems. So it doesn't matter what happens to this. In fact, it's something that should be feared. It's something that should be conquered, in many cases, eradicated. And in its place, giant man made testimonies to the glory of God. It's the early version of suburbs, Tessa, where you come in and you cut down all the trees and then you put up a shopping center and name it after the trees that you cut out. It's the Thousand Oaks Shopping Center. It's
I
on Elm Street, it's Maple, whatever. Yeah, it's
ah,
that.
no, I think I like that analogy, and my own journey was that. So when I figured out how much we've been lied to, and that hurt because that's like, oh my God, everything I was taught was and I mean everything that I was taught was a lie, and that's not an easy thing to deal with. That's like, holy fuck, and then you want to tell everybody, nobody cares, and I mean, like, there's a familiar drill. Like, you figure something out, like, oh my God, I'm going to tell you this. You are not going to believe this. And like, what? Get out of town, right? So, and then, but then it comes with a certain resentment towards people who still live in a lie, right? And then overcoming that resentment for me is where it's at. Because then you're like, oh, so people actually have the power, first of all, to reclaim things. And there are many, many wonderful, like, Christians and people who practice, well, frankly, like any mainstream religion, and they're taking it to the right place and they're using it to fight the like the Great Reset and all those things. That's also real. So going to another extreme, saying, okay, this good, this bad, doesn't work either. And so it's a very, very interesting dance that is completely mysterious. I can't even explain it, but it's like you understand that everything you were taught was a lie, and at the same time you accept the good version of how people like process a lie and turn it into something true, and that's mind blowing. And you can't even express it with words. And and I think this is how life is, and like, good luck to all of us.
Yeah, and I try to at least have uh, a large amount of empathy, whatever, for people who are just discovering, or who don't know, especially the people who don't know. The the frustrates come from the people that do know but need to pretend, and need to pretend that it's not so, because that's where, I well, at the I guess at the level of corporate interest or Congress critter or something like that, they're pretending because their lives literally depend on it.
Right.
But there's all of the ecosystems that sort of satellite around that, are built on people who are either so propagandized that they refuse to peer out from the other side of their bubble and are still consciously making a choice to stay there, or people who know better and are pretending it's otherwise, because that however many thousands of dollar a month apartment in Brooklyn in the good gentrified neighborhood with the rest of the high class journalistas or whatever it is, or on the West Coast, having the house in Malibu or having that, whatever, that's way more important than no longer pretending and telling people a little bit more about what you've discovered about how the world works.
Agreed. And taking it back to the new agey stuff that we both love so much. And I'm joking, it's not new agey.
I'm about to grab my favorite piece of tourmaline, though.
No, first the Russian hat. Like, we
Okay.
only go fully New Age after I get my Russian hat from you and Pasta.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, like, none of that I think is possible without feeling the love. I mean, like, none of it. Like, when you deal with like your relatives who you think have ideas that are silly, when you deal with whatever happened in your childhood, and maybe again your family or your parents who did things that now you're thinking, oh my God, how could they have done it to me? And then you realize that they did it from love, and it still hurts. And I mean, like, and working through all that is impossible without remembering love. I mean, like, that's how you remember it. It's like, holy fuck, all that was for love. All that was to find the love. And I think when you figure that out, well, then it's the rest of your life of hard work, like trying to make the world better. Like, it doesn't turn into a butterfly immediately, but that's the only way. But then going back to the institutional religion versus the natural that you were talking about, it's like deification of abstract thinking is a bitch, because when something is, and again, I do not think that God is unintelligent, and I think God is capable of figuring out like what's in the heart and what the person feels and what each of ourselves is feeling and all that. So there's a layer before language, which is nonverbal, which is like the feeling, the reality, right? And so saying that operating in that field is a sin, and instead we should like forget all about it and graft external words, then adopt them, internalize them, and become virtuous this way, that cannot really work like truly. It can work for dogma, it can work for, there's this psychological thing, and it actually happens in every camp, where people, like, they can forgive you for doing something against their talking points as long as you proclaim their talking points.
Yeah.
It's almost like when, if somebody's spouse is cheating, but he says, oh, I don't really mean to cheat, and like, yeah, I'm like, yeah, like, I'm cheating, but it's not a good thing to do, so like, I really shouldn't. So it's like then the person on the other end would like think that it's easier than if the person were just like cheating and saying I'm entitled to, right? And
Okay.
it's very interesting. And so, but then that's the abstract thinking. So if somebody proclaims that other person's talking points, whether it's like this is Christianity, or this is climate change, or this is the vaccine, then there is this fake bonding, or maybe not fake, but it's a very tricky situation
Yeah.
because it's not real. And then I really don't know where I'm going with that, but hopefully it makes some sense.
Well, it does, and you're right, and it comes down to the fact that people have been trained to not do their own thinking, to yield their critical thinking skills to experts, or to benevolent multimillionaires who, with the agents from an acting agency, who put them on camera, they read off of a teleprompter, and those are the experts. And so as long as we're training generations to seed their critical thinking, that's going to continue. And so it comes to a point to where when you start to encourage it, there's pushback on all ends, and there's even pushback within, like, dude, you spend enough time in the conspiracy community or something like that, there's pushback at every level, in terms of where people think they're at with their understanding of how the world works. And like, you're encouraging people to question everything, and they're like, well, you can do that, except for you can't question terrain theory, or you can't question flat earth, it's just flat, that's the end of no other questions can be asked. And and it's like, well, hang on, because you know you guys are where I found out that anyone selling certainty is lying to me. This is where I learned this. Could we now there's an endpoint to it? I don't understand. And so there is at every level just some sort of, holding on to letting other people do your critical thinking. And I'm sure I'm guilty of it with things. I'm sure I am, you know. Um, but I mean, that's a challenge that's got to be recognized and met and overcome with however you overcome your shit. Again, I can't tell you how to do it. I don't know. Like I can't just speak for other people in that, right?
No, there's a reason you're awesome. I agree with that. Yeah, that's
Shucks. Think there's a list of people who would disagree with you. However, that's what makes the world a beautiful place, and can uh, only encourage dissent and hope that whatever shit comes by way is at least legitimate and out of love. Gives something to think about. You know what I mean?
I know. Yeah, I think. Well, it's definitely time to take the crystals out.
I'm actually I'm looking at it right over there. I do. I lived in California for almost 20 years. Of course, I got a crystal or two lying around. It's part of it. You either buy a toy, you either have a Toyota pickup truck or a Subaru, and you always have some crystals lying around. It's the California version. In Florida, you either get a cup of orange juice or a handgun, and I kind of like the Florida version better, but I don't know. I don't know. Gator repellent. I think they're passing out. It's getting close to 10 o'clock over here. I have a couple of I'm house sitting, dog sitting for my neighbor. So I have an extra set of dogs that I gotta go take care of every handful of hours for another couple of days until Teal gets back in. Tessa, I enjoy the heck out of our conversations, and you're always welcome on the show.
Thank
Um,
you. Well, you as well. Once I post the one that we did.
yeah, and again, I mean, in its own time, just let me know when it comes out, and I'll be like, oh shit, that's right, we did
You were
that.
like,
Yeah,
oh, did I say that? Was it AI?
that's a horrifying thought that I'm gonna have to remember what I say. Like, well, I have okay. So on an external hard drive, I have a bunch of the show archives and
Uh,
stuff like that. So unless they're getting messed with on the transfer, I'm pretty sure there's a record of what my full yap said that will be accurate for good or ill.
well, a year from now, it's like vote Biden, and I endorse it. And you're like, did I actually?
Hi, this is AM Wake Up, and would like to tell you that Ron DeSantis is a super good guy with your best interests. No, no,
Well,
no.
yeah, no, I mean, like that. That I think our next president will be AI, probably. That's. And by the way, I know that there's like a lot of. I actually do like Bobby Kennedy. I don't think he's going to. I don't think anybody's going to let him. But like, I think, and it doesn't mean that I agree with him on everything, but I do respect him. And I think, I mean, that's my modus operandi in general. I operate on like village stuff. Like, I like you, so I like you, and we agree or disagree or whatnot. So, but I don't think we're going to have that. I mean, like, I don't think it works this way. So,
Yeah, I don't dislike him as a person. I've never met him, but there's things about him that I like. There's definitely things about him that I don't like. But at the end of the day, dude, it's not my vanity project, and it's not me. I'm not. I don't get to stop anybody from running for president, nor would I, outside of this is something that is deliberately pulling people into a two-party paradigm that exists to continue control and exists to continue. And so at a moment where everyone has been in the process of doing a lot of waking up, one of the central hero figures from that awakening, it has been placed into the role to sort of Pied Piper people back into the duopoly. And so it would be, I think, um, it would certainly be out of character for me to not notice that and say it out loud. But again, it's, everybody already knows where I stand on the whole political system thing. So it's not like it would be earth shattering information or whatever, at least coming from me. Having said all that, I think um, it'll be wild to watch, and it has been wild to watch the reaction to him running. We showed a thing this
Oh,
morning.
yeah.
We showed a thing this morning. I don't know if you saw it or not, but he had an interview with ABC, and they cut a bunch of it, and then they had the interviewer lady come on to be like, he was saying dangerous misinformation, so we removed it from this interview for your safety, kind of thing.
Oh God.
Yeah, and I felt really bad for the guy. She's got RFK Jr. across from her, and she's like, let's take a look at some of the things your family members have said about your stance on the vaccine, and like your own family's calling you dangerous and all this kind of stuff. And he's like, what? How am I supposed to react to this? What do you want from me? Like that's hectic. It is. So watching that's going to be insane. And as I have defended people that I don't agree with frequently, I'm sure I will find myself defending RFK Jr. in a number of different situations. But I don't agree
I
with the
have
whole.
great respect for him. Again, it doesn't mean that I agree with every word that comes out of his mouth, but it's also true for most human beings. I think what he's doing, I mean, he's kind of risking his life. So I mean, like, I think that is a very brave thing to do, and he has a cause and he believes in something. That said, I'm not subscribed to the view that the system works all together. So these are two separate like things that exist in my head. I really like and respect him. I don't think that the political part works at all, but that's like, again, welcome to Earth. Because I cannot change that, I just focus my efforts elsewhere.
Yeah, yeah. No, I would like nothing more than to spend all of election season not talking about elections. That would be awesome. Fortunately, it's a 5-day a week news show, so it's probably going to come up here and there. Um, Tessa, let everybody know where they can find your work, how they can support you, all that good stuff. And again, thank you so much, my friend. I enjoy these.
Oh, absolutely. Like anytime. You're one of my favorite people. So absolutely. And where they can find me, it's tessa.substack.com. And if you search for Tessa Fights Robots, that's me.
Heck yeah. Well, cool. Thank you so much. I'm gonna thank a couple of producers and then get on out of here.
I'm still waiting for the Russian hat. I mean, elections, schmelections. I mean, where's my Russian hat?
Okay. I'll make it happen. I'll make it happen. All right.
I'll talk to you later. Thank you, Steve.
Taking initiative. All right, Tessa.
Okay.
You have a wonderful weekend and you take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.